So welcome, I'm Timia Wharton-Surrey of Dance Immersion, and I'm here today speaking to Ronald Taylor of Ronald Taylor Dance and Emily Jabouin, a dance artist and researcher. And we're speaking today about the dance work Psychosis, which was choreographed by Ronald, and Emily's one of the dancers in the piece. And it's one of the few pieces of dance that tackles mental health issues. And Dance Immersion this month of January 2021 really wants to focus on highlighting mental health resources. So I'm really happy to speak with both of you today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Let's just dive right in. So Ronald, what inspired you to create Psychosis?
Yes. Well, first of all, I am an observer of life. I am an observer of the human condition. And that stems back from me in my childhood. So apart from me going through my own psychosis at the age of 48, I observed in my childhood many people like my mother, the neighbors, the people in our community, a singer in the community, a lady who would dress up like Mae West. And we would laugh because we did not understand the plight in which people were going through until I myself had gone through my own psychosis. So in a nutshell, it comes full circle. And that was my inspiration. Losing my family, losing my home and my worldly possession, having to be in shelters and just trying to find myself and to find my place in the world once more. So that was the inspiration for Psychosis.
And we know, unfortunately, that there's so much stigma with mental health issues. Were you concerned about stigma for yourself or for the work in terms of opportunities to present the work in tackling this subject matter?
No, because one thing I always, now that my parents are passed, the things that they say resonates even more with me. And I remember my mother used to say, you do good or you do bad, people will talk. So I often, when I pick a subject, if I believe that I cannot accomplish it, I would not do it. So the stigmas and the naysayers and the talkers, it never really came to the forefront in my mind. I believed, even in some recesses of my own psychosis, that I needed to bring this work forward because even in Toronto here, we see people and they're very verbose. These small individuals or big individuals are very verbose when they're going through psychosis or they become very meek. So in that respect, no, as an artist, life happens and life imitates art and art imitates life. And as an artist, in my senior years, I thought that I needed to bring this to the community, to our community in particular, where there's a lot of stigma. So that's what I did. And it took about a good 5 years to really do Psychosis the way I would like it to. And onto the premiere, I'm still tweaking at it to make sure that it is a well-rounded piece of art in the Canadian milieu.
Mm-hmm. And Emily, how did you become involved in this work?
Well, so first I would say that I wanted to be involved in the work because it talked about mental health, and it was also a piece that rose awareness around these issues that are often ignored or, that aren't really talked about, especially also in the dance world. And so that attracted me to the piece. But to be honest, When when Ronald was rehearsing the piece, he was just trying a few different things, and I was just on the sideline. I was in the studio. I was watching Michael actually perform one of the solos, and I just started daydreaming. And during that daydreaming session or moment, I thought like I could see myself on stage doing the work, and then Ronald looked at me and he said, Emily, he said something like, what are you thinking? And I said, I see myself in this piece. And he said, oh, child, no, I don't. I don't have money to pay you. But for me, especially because it was really at the beginning of my journey as a professional dance artist. So for me, it was just really about having the opportunity to be part of a piece that would be as challenging as this one, that really asked dancers to tap into either their life experiences or to be vulnerable. And that's I just wanted to be involved. So that's how I got involved in the work.
So you mentioned Michael. Who are some of the other artists involved in the work?
Well, we have Michael Motley, Prime Anthony Guerra, Curtis Bruiser Noel, Richard Popcorn Cumberbatch, Autrey Nundi, Kelly Lasonges, I might pronounce that wrong.
La Jeunesse.
Yes. Emily Jabouin, Joy Laps Lois, Derek Thorne, and Majid.
And you'd mentioned Popcorn had been involved at some point.
He has worked with me over the years of the company, and I brought him in as a character in Psychosis. He's the one who inflicts all the psychosis, even though those characteristics are unseen in the natural eye, but I just thought I might represent that character as an actual person.
And so
yes, and it's coming. One of the things that I do also is that I pick certain characters out of Trinidad folklore and carnival characters.
Okay.
I picked something called Jab Jab, which really means the devil, and he extorts money from you by singing, dancing, but his main aim is to extort things from you, and if you don't, he will terrorize you. So basically, that's what that character represents in the whole of Psychosis.
Okay, and you mentioned this process, and so we all know going through an artistic process, as it is, you learn. And you grow up for a piece that's so, intense and with such a deep topic. What are some of the things you both learned through the creative process?
So there are many things I learned. I learned a lot about psychosis, particularly hearing from Ronald's experiences and also hearing from friends who started opening up to me when they started hearing that I was part of a piece like this one. And being vulnerable was a big learning piece for me because at some point I had to really get into the character and I had to really be honest about what I was saying about my own experiences as well. And that just took me to a whole other level because then I realized that there was a little bit of fear that if I reveal too much on stage, people might actually know what I'm talking about. So I think there was a lot of negotiating for me between what I wanted to present and a part of the story, and then what might actually come out when I dance, certain characters. So there was that, and there were also technical things like learning to use my costume as a prop, something that I hadn't done very much of because a lot of costumes I had worked with before were just sort of fitted for a character or presentation, whereas in this case, it was a heavy fabric, and I had to, for example, in the solo Divine, where I am in yellow and white, and I'm representing a sort of Oshun-inspired character, I really had to use the skirt and the movement, and so that took a lot for me. So I learned a lot from that.
And you, Ronald, what about you?
Well, basically, I learn about myself. I learn about the human's condition of overcoming because I had to overcome my psychosis in order to bring this forward. I also learned a lot about when you, as a person who has the lead on a topic, and then you have to give everybody their characters. You have to be clear, about it. And in this particular, this is have been my most collaborative work where, the dancers really questioned me. They really took me at 110% in terms of trying to understand the character because we were all invested in it. And it was wondrous to see what came out of it and my opening up myself,
Right.
to the whole process also as director, conceptualist, and creator of Psychosis. So we really delve deep into this work, and those are some of the things that I learned, so the dancers brought themselves
Mm-hmm.
in the process, and I was able to mold and shape and say, no, we're not going down this road, let's go down this road. And they will ask me why, but not in a contextual way, but in a more inquisitive, interpretive type of a way that we could understand and give the best of ourselves when we go out there. So I was pretty nervous also when the piece was being performed, because it was so raw,
Right.
having the audience look into us at, this juncture in our creativity.
Right. And you had to transmit to the dancers and to the audience, really. It's got
Yes.
elements of psychosis, but also, as you mentioned, Trinidadian folklore,
Right.
weaving those pieces together.
Yes. 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 The One of the things we used to do is to meet a lot, and this never happened before in the history of the company. We met a lot, we ate, we laughed, we talked, we checked in with each other, we grew, and that's where the building, apart from being in the studio, the building of the connections that we had. Like Prime and Emily has prior connection. Prime and I have prior connection stemming all the way back from Trinidad. Popcorn, Bruiser, I've observed basically all the people that I've worked with for a period of time before I ask them. I do not hold auditions for the work. Is in my travels artistically, and creatively, when I see people, then I ask them to come and be part of the process with whatever I deemed and I bring forward.
Right. And you answered part of my next question, which is how did you create a safe environment when so many artists are sharing and going so deep and becoming so vulnerable? What did you do? And you mentioned it was the talking, the checking in with one another.
Yes. Well, apart from that, Emily brought that checking in question to the whole collaborative process. And my psychiatrist, who I used to see, Dr. Greg, when she brought that to me, I went back to him in one of our sessions, him and I said to him, this is what I'm working on. So he understand because he took me on, as a patient. And I said, do you have resources that I could, just if something happens to one of my artists, that I could send them to relate them to? And he says, yes. And he was the one who introduced me to workman's art.
Mm.
And I contacted them, become a member, and also I know they have a lot of facilities that will help just in case one of us might have triggered some bit of psychosis, schizophrenia, or whatever, that we have this ability to go to and say, we need help.
Right.
Because I remember one day when many years ago, before I met these dancers and thinking of doing Psychosis, I called up one of my senior leaders in faith, and I said to her, I said, Peggy, I don't feel well. This is what's happening to me. And she says, okay, I'm going to pick you up. And she took me to Mount Sinai Hospital and sat with me all night, until they attended to me. So, thanks to Emily, we were really checking in with each other and making sure that everyone was okay until, we got on stage.
Right. And that's wonderful. So you had each other internally, but then you also had the external resources lined up in case you needed extra help.
Yes.
That's great. And that leads me to my next question. You mentioned Workman Arts. I know you've performed excerpts or iterations of the work so far. And so for Emily, how have audiences so far reacted to the work?
Yeah, so I'd say that there's very positive, overwhelming positive response, especially because just everybody who I speak to is just opening up, like, as though, and I think this surprised me to a certain extent. And that's part of the stigma, right? Is like, why was I so surprised that so many people around me were going through similar mental health issues? But just seeing people saying, yeah, that character, like, they're itching or scratching, like, I went through that, and this is what happened, and this is what it felt like, and just people talking about their episodes, or excuse me, people talking about how they saw themselves on stage. For me, that was also very validating. Even Denise, Ronald's wife, saying that she saw a specific scene and said, wow, that's us, like, that's how it happened. So I felt so fulfilled as a dancer to hear that people could really relate and connect to what we had presented. So that's been good. Yeah, that's been great, actually.
And it sounds like, we know mental health touches people in different ways. It might not be you specifically, but somebody, or it's been in your family or a friend. And so it's touching all of those people. And it sounds like you obviously don't need to know about the Trinidadian folklore characters and things to be able to grasp the concept and to be able to connect with the work.
Yes, rightfully so. Rightfully so. Emily mentioned Denise, my wife, and she is part of my sounding board. Almost everything I do, in terms of artistically, I would pass it by her because she is a 9-to-5er. And she says, well, how are you going to interpret our life? Because you left the family, you break up the marriage, the children, they didn't know what was happening with you and whatnot, So so she challenged me in a sense as artistically in the way I was going to interpret through a duet what was happening with her and I, because she also confided in me and saying, I thought I would have gone mad because of what was happening to the family at that point in time. So yeah, it was very, very rough, and I wouldn't wish it on any family, but all I could say, there is help out there. There is help through social services and on many level case workers and basically, because that's the way I found myself, some resemblance of my former self. And I was able to build on that resemblance. And here I am, going into the 6th year of Psychosis, talking about it, And hopefully, you know, with this being it, hopefully to touch someone somewhere that they're not suffering alone.
Yes, and if we are suffering, to reach out to, even if it's one person,
Yes,
and just let them know.
yes. One person changes everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to add also that the fact that the piece was speaking to people also allowed them to speak. And we know how important it is to speak about these things, right? To speak about what we're going through in order for us to heal or to stay present. And that's, yeah, that's something. So I also feel like the audience almost received so much comfort or therapy or, support through the work. And I also wanted to mention that, so the duet that Ronald was talking about that represented him and Denise's struggles was danced by Michael and Audrey. And it's just, I have to say it was fantastic. Like in the first, no, I have to say, because it's just the way that, even as somebody who, I mean, I've been in partnerships, I've been in relationships, and seeing just that really honest dynamic between two people and the love, and just it just seemed like everything Ronald was expressing, like the two dancers were just able to put it together. And then with the music, did you want to talk about that? I feel like that's a really important part of the piece.
I know, but I think you're doing, I think Emily is doing a justifiable job in terms of explaining it.
Yeah.
But what I also want to say, from our tradition, our African tradition, African Caribbean, African Canadian traditions, we have storytellers, we have griots, you know, that's able to pass down stories from generation to generation. So that is what, in terms of when the company was called Cambule Dance Theatre into Ronald Taylor Dance, that is what I thought of myself as bringing our stories to the forefront, letting people, African Canadian people, see themselves on stage, to be able to experience the emotions we have as human beings, you know, whether to get angry or sad or joy or whatever may have you. And those are the type of things that people took away, because Denise said she actually cried when she saw the suitcase, because when I was in the hospital in the throes of my psychosis, I asked her to pack my clothes and bring it to the hospital for me.
Mm.
And she did. And we both cried, you know, but I knew that I didn't exactly know where I was going, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
But I left the family, you know, and when we do understand what's happening, because I didn't know what was happening to me, you know, that tears apart things. It tears apart society. It pulls you away. It tugs at the heartstring. So yeah, psychosis is one of those one of the toughest that I've created in my artistic career.
And as Emily mentioned, the music, and you mentioned African traditions where music and dance is one.
Yes.
And so integrating the music in this work, how did that come about?
One of the things that when I started the company, almost 30 years now, I have as the musical instrument for the company is the steel pan, the tenor pan, because I love the sound of it and what it represented in terms of coming out of the drum being band. And in Trinidad, we created something out of nothing. And but one of the things I learned from my artistic mentor, Asta Johnson, is how to work with the dancers and how to work with the musicians. One of the things that I do, I'm still able to move. So I go into the studio by myself to create sequences. I bring in the dancers next. Then we work on it. We source it. You know, yes, no, maybe hold it, keep it in the background. And then thirdly, I bring in the music last. And why I do that is because having gone through the processes of getting these things done, I could hear in my head what it is I want to interpret the dance musically.
Right.
And I'm not a trained musician, but I know what it is I want, even though sometimes I will challenge, and most times I challenge the musicians. I said, play something for me, extempo for me. You know, let me hear. Okay, I like that. Hold on to that. I like this. Da 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 da. And that's the way. So I use this process all the time. I've done that ever since I started the company. So it's my go-to process,
Right.
creating work.
And that was such a good process to also learn from, because I had never experienced working with the steel pan and sort of co-creating with the drums also. And it really required the musicians and dancers to also be in sync, right? And to
Yes.
feel each other and to take risks, honestly, because I think there were moments where I tended to be a person who was hesitating and thinking, okay, where are we going? But then, you know, the drummer has to follow me. But then also being able to communicate and to have a rhythm of my own and to honor that rhythm, that was all really a good process to go through, a really interesting process. I thank Ronald so much for it. Yes.
Yes.
Well, between the music, the movement, the theme, it sounds like you all came together as one and are still, as you say, developing this work. So where are we going to see Psychosis next?
Well, I do hope, let me first say that Psychosis has had funding from the three levels of government the first time in the company's history. So I thank them, which is the Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, and Canada Council for the Arts. Psychosis hopefully is going to premiere in June. I'm not sure of the exact dates because we do not have the theaters open because of the pandemic. So hopefully it's in June of 2022, or if not June, some latter part of the year where we have the time to really brush up on things, pull it back and pull the artists back together and, you know, head on into fantastic celebration of life and art.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And I want to thank both of you so much for sharing with me your experiences and the work. So thank you very much for speaking with me today.
And we want to also thank you and Dance Immersion for taking the lead on this very important and poignant subject.
Thank you. And so I want to end the interview with a clip. And it's a clip of part of Psychosis filmed outside. So could you tell us a little bit about this clip before we end?
Okay. Actually, this piece is called Comrades. And it's danced by Emily and Michael. And what it is, this clip represents, I am reimagining a husband and wife in distant shores. And what you will not see is the antagonist, Jab Jab, tearing the letters that the husband sends back to the wife. So he is antagonizing her. And so she is only able to read part of the letter and imagine the other parts. You know, so in this time of COVID, where we weren't in the studios and able to get the new parts that I want to recreate, as I said, I'm also working on. I said, let's go outside. Let's film it outside. Let's have the people in the background. Let's utilize the tracks of life where people run around to, reassure themselves, to give themselves hope with the sun shining and people calling out to us and saying different things as we were working. So this is part of a reimagined duet called Comrades.
Thank you again, and let's watch the clip.